Hey y'all, it's Clark. I'm here at the Florida National Cemetery in Bushnell. I came here for an unusual reason, I think, and I think it was a place that I wanted to feel at home and feel like I could connect with those that have came before me. And I wanted to show you guys a little bit of our tour. And as much as we don't want to talk about the negative side effects to war, the reality is a lot of those people come home to places just like this. So when we were looking for a place to shoot this interview, I thought nothing more than to come to a place again that my heart was drawn to. So not only is it a beautiful place, but it's extremely somber, and it's a place that it forces you to go back and think about the lives that have been lost serving overseas, so that I could play music for a living or so that you could do whatever you're doing. One of the new things for me was to bring together and piece together a brand new band that I had to take over that, you know, we talk a lot about that Clark Hill is more than a name, it's more than a place, it's a way of life. So how do I get people to take on my personality and not just be a hired gun? And that was a big fear of mine. The cool thing is we were able to squash that fear almost immediately. We had 10 people, including myself, that traveled over 8,000 miles from home, and blessed enough to not have any disagreements, any arguments. We had 10 guys that were proud, happy, humbled to be there. And you know, we even found ways to get along on 13 and 14 and 16-hour flights. So we started off in Djibouti, Africa, which was, you know, probably the place I would have rather ended it. I like the idea of staying on base with the military personnel, but it was super hot. It was crazy to think that just in August, so 3 months before we got there, it was 141 degrees. So for us, you know, even as a Florida boy, 95, 96 degrees in November, humid and hot, it was crazy to perform a show in. But again, you're seeing troops over there and they're fully outfitted in gear from head to toe, and they're serving this country. And in that place, what was so humbling about it was they're serving for an entirely different reason. In Djibouti, they're there specifically to take care of the countries around there. So we're there for hospitality reasons more than anything, or aid. I think what stood out to me the most about the Djibouti Africa show was how much these troops were happy to see us. I went over there with the expectations of very little, to be honest, because I felt like these people wouldn't know who I was as an artist, being so new in the industry, not even being a big name nationally, and now here we are. I'm traveling globally to play for people all over the country and all over the world, but I was wrong. They were excited to see an American face and some American sounds, and that was what was so humbling about it, was that they actually showed that excitement from the very beginning. So to kick off our tour, again in a foreign country, and to have hundreds of people screaming for you and happy to see you on the stage was something that I'll never be able to forget. And I think it kicked off the tour exactly how it needed to be kicked off. Starting that night, we started what ended up becoming a tradition. So I took an American flag over with us that we were going to bring back home. We were taking pictures with certain troops with it. That night, we used about 20 or 30 guys and ladies that came in and shook our hands in the meet and greet. We opened up the American flag, took a picture with them, and we were going to call it a night. But as I turned around, I remember seeing them folding that flag, and it hit me then how special that fabric, those colors, and those stars meant to those men and women. So as the tour went on, and as you're about to see, that tradition grew and expanded exponentially. For our second show, we moved on to United Arab Emirates. It was an Air Force base in the middle of the desert yet again. The cool thing about this place was it was a little different. It wasn't as long-lasting or long-standing, so there were tents. Actually, our first night there, that's what we stayed in, was a tent on a concrete pad. I think what the guys liked about that, though, is you actually feel like you've been immersed into what their culture is becoming. Because as much as you want to believe that we've taken the American culture over there, they have restaurants, they have things that they try to give to the troops that build that morale, the truth is you're still in the middle of the desert, it's still super hot, and it's still not home. We were here at UAE at the night of the election. The reason why I bring that up, though, is to think about the political climate that we're in. These guys didn't care. They're there for a very specific reason. And the reality is, regardless of which president became president, they were still going to be there serving this country. And I think I latched onto that during the show that night and realized that the troop morale wasn't going to have anything to do with which president was crowned per se that night. Had everything to do with what they were over there doing, the job they were trying to accomplish. And for us, could we bring them just a little piece of home? That night was born the first time that we heard the "Give me 90 minutes" hashtag. So as I started trying to build the morale of the troops, me being me was very honest. I knew that these people didn't know who I was, but all I asked was for them to give me 90 minutes. I wanted 90 minutes to try to make them forget where they were. And as much as when I would say it at the beginning of the show, in UAE for the first time it proved true that at the end of the 90 minutes they had done just that. Everyone had forgotten where they were, even if it was for just a moment. And all they realized and all they felt was the person standing beside them. Just like when they were in battle or just like when they're on a mission, you latch arms regardless of what race or religion or political beliefs you have, and you fight for a common good. Once we got to Kuwait, things changed a lot for us. We were staying in a 5-star hotel, but the schedule got a little crazy. We would wake up every morning, we'd drive an hour to a base, crazy traffic. We literally had a protection detail, like a protective service detail, that was assigned to us just because of how bad the traffic was. They took us within 8 miles of the Iraqi border, which none of us knew was happening. It turned out to be, in my opinion, one of the most epic shows the entire trip. To go over and see these troops that were on the ground literally by day and some by night, that were actually out fighting. They were fighting in Syria, fighting in Mosul, fighting in some of the streets of Iraq, trying to make sure that yet again, I could be out playing music for a living. So this is where it set in for me how thankful everybody was I was there and how much I didn't like hearing that. The truth was it was my honor, it was my band's honor, my crew's honor to go over there, look these troops in the eye, shake their hand, and give them just a little taste of home. So for those of you that have been to a Clark Hill show before, you know I have a habit of not really staying to the script. So I ended up jumping off the stage. And here's the thing, these people have no clue who I am, and I know that. So I'm trying to get their attention early on in the show. I'm trying to make sure that they are very well aware of what's about to happen. So I ended up off the stage climbing on picnic tables. And it wasn't taken too kindly. They didn't like that. Let me rephrase that. The crowd loved it, but some gentleman decided to tell me that it wasn't allowed and that it wasn't safe. Me being me, chose to jump to another table, and he then provided me a safety belt. So for those of you that are prior military or grew up around military, I was schooled on what the safety belt means. Apparently it makes you invincible. It handles everything. We found out with the safety belt jokes that literally they can have reflective outfits on from head to toe, and if they don't have a safety belt on, they're in trouble, like literal trouble. So this guy hands me a safety belt, and I'll be honest, he did it in a really punky way. So guy, if you're watching and listening to this, be nicer next time. That night at Camp Buehring on the northern side of Kuwait, we had an experience that to me still wasn't touched. So I broke out an American flag on stage that night. As I told you before, the first 2 nights we were doing it with the meet and greet crowd. Something felt different that night to me. So I broke out the flag on stage. I asked everyone to come up and join me. Now let's try to take the picture together. But I think you're gonna see right here exactly what transpired. The difference was this time was these troops, they're doing a little bit more than what some of the others were, to be honest. Every day, they were out working in areas that their safety was in every way paramount. Safety was an issue there. While we were at Camp Buehring, we actually found out of a life that passed on the base while we were there in a training exercise. None of this we knew while we're standing on stage. And here we are with hundreds of people passing an American flag over the top of a crowd, touching it, each hand wanting to touch it. Because that fabric, that color, it meant something to them that night. That's when I realized how important this trip was really becoming. Here we are, just our 3rd show in, and we realized that we were already making a difference. We were already doing something bigger than, like I always talk about, when can I do something bigger than myself? Never being bigger than the moment. That night, in the middle of Kuwait, the moment got way bigger than me. I think the experience that I had, I think it fed onto the other guys where you have tears falling, you have people that are truly, by definition, humbled by the experience. So here we are where I'm begging for the crowd to give me 90 minutes, but instead they gave me 90 minutes. They gave me 90 minutes to forget about everything that I've ever done and realize how special of a moment and how special of an opportunity this really was. Camp Buehring was also special not only because of the fun that we had with the crowd, as well as the moment with the flag. But we also were approached afterwards, and I was asked if that flag that I brought from here in the United States, if they could take it and fly it over the city of Kuwait City, and then give me a certificate showing that it'd be flown. So obviously, I was totally okay with that. It did put us in a little predicament though, because I planned on making sure that this flag was used and a picture was taken at every place. And we had another base the very next day that we had to play at. On the way to the Air Force Base in the middle of Kuwait, on day 2 in this country, we also got to meet our brand new friend, Mike. We've heard a lot about Mike in America on Wednesdays only. We got to see camels. May not sound like a big deal. These were really friendly camels. So we felt like we had the greatest welcome party to base yet. So instead of just getting troops, we got some locals too. Yes! By the way, now's a good time to show some footage of the sand. The grass doesn't exist. There is no leaves. They have trees, planted ones. There's nothing there. Like literally, there's a highway in the middle of a bunch of sand. We do have, though, a lot of carnivals. They like carnivals out there. So apparently they have a tradition where they like to go out and the government pays the local Kuwaitis to go out and live off the land like they used to. So they pay their servants, because they're very wealthy, to set up these huge tents. They get like 12 four-wheelers and a bunch of off-road vehicles, and they make themselves a little flat parking lot for their Range Rovers and their Audis and BMWs, and they live in tents with air conditioning, TVs, and carnival lights. But they do still have camels, so I guess that makes them locals. When we arrived at our next stop in Kuwait, we had a lot of fun. This unit commander was on point. I learned my new favorite phrase, which this may not make the footage, but warheads on foreheads. I loved it. I love to hear guys that didn't care about being politically correct and were all about making sure that the mission was accomplished. When we got to this base though, there was something that was missing. We were missing an American flag. So the unit commander found out about what had happened the night before at the northern base in Kuwait and decided that he wanted to do the same thing, but he wanted to do it on a mission over Syria and Mosul. So I received yet again another flag that was donated and flown on a CH-130 on 2 missions that very night while we were on stage play. The predicament it left me with though was having a flag brought to me that had just been purchased at the PX. Not only did we get to experience some of the things that we were already getting at other places, we got a little special treatment there, including getting EOD to bring out a very special vehicle and parking it behind the stage while we played. So that made for a pretty epic backdrop, I think. But I think the first thing that stood out to me for the show itself was the fact that as soon as we hit the stage, the people were already up front, on their feet, screaming, clapping, and ready to go. I think it made for a unique start for us because we felt like we were already welcomed before we ever even got the music started. This is the visit where I started to notice that there was going to be a consistency in the theme every night. Yet again, not only were people excited to see us when we hit the stage, but here we were folding a flag at the end of the night, just like we had the night before, and just like we were going to do for the rest of the tour. At this stop, we were greeted just a little differently. It was one of my favorite parts to see that it wasn't just proud Americans overseas serving. There were other countries just as proud to be there as we were. When we got to this Air Force base, we were greeted by none other than the Italian Air Force. They showed a lot of pride showing us their aircraft and talking to us a little bit about what their mission was over there. We would see them later again that night at the show, and it make for one of my fondest memories of the whole trip. So here we are looking at this Air Force base, and there's these huge hangars that the French had made that were supposed to be bomb-proof. The Iraqis had went in and taken them over and were, making themselves at home inside of these bases. And then here we go, America comes in and drops a little whoop-a on them, and there's holes in every one of them. So it was really cool to see that, the true power, both physically, but also as well, what we pulled off. To see a war that existed, me as a child, something you hear about on TV, and to actually see firsthand exactly what America went in and did, and why our relationship with Kuwait is as strong as it is today, is because of that right there. The thing about this place was, there were 7 men that were Italian pilots. The cool thing was, we had just met them that morning, viewed some of their jets, and here they were watching us fold our flag, and they showed just as much respect, if not more, for the red, white, and blue than you'd ever see here back home. To see 7 men from another country stand at absolute attention out of respect for our flag became another moment that is more humbling than I could ever explain to you. The cool thing about this night wasn't just that, it was a more intimate affair. We didn't have hundreds and hundreds of people there. We had a decently small crowd with a small venue. But this crowd was tuned in like none other. That night was born the joining of the crowd with Clark Hill on stage. They joined me on stage to fold the flag and yet again show the respect that I feel like this country deserves. It's not shown by many artists or many folks, period. So on our next day in the trip, we showed up to another base that yet again, we go in, and like I said, just being honest, I don't expect these people to know who I am. I'm just there. At this point, I'm not even a face on a photo, I'm just these blue eyes on a photo that I decided that I thought would be a great idea to send to a bunch of men in the middle of a desert and think that it would promote me well. That didn't go over so well. You walk on base and they're like, oh, what pretty eyes. I'm like, uh-oh, so here we go. They don't know who I am. They have no clue. This one was a little different though, because when I got there, they knew a little bit more about who I was. See, the Camp Buring thing apparently was pushed onto a website called Army WTF. And right on the front page of this website was a big picture of me standing on a picnic table and them basically joking about the safety belt. And it had that, quote, Clark Hill stands on table, is approached about wearing a safety belt, and he decides to put it on as the crowd goes nuts and he finishes singing. So they wanted to know if there would be any reoccurrence of that, which ended quite well as always, because I turned to tour manager and say, hey, I need 6 safety belts because we're going to wear safety belts on stage tonight. Definitely had a little fun with that live. We have just another amazing experience. This time, I think what stood out so much to me, for those of you that talked to me before I left, I talked about how much that I wanted the name Clark Hill to mean more than just an artist to these people. I wanted to go over and make a difference, look them in the eye and shake every hand they'd let me shake. That night, as we folded up that flag, talked about how humbled of a man I'd become because of this opportunity. I looked these men and these women in the eye, told them I'd love to shake their hand down at the meet and greet. And then, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes later, I'm still standing on a stage, the band is still playing music, and I'm looking men and women that are serving us in the eyes, and they're standing on stage in a line shaking my hand. And the thing was, is none of us wanted to turn them away. Nobody cared about time anymore, nothing else mattered. As the tears flowed down my face, all I could think of was what an honor it was for me to shake their hands. When in turn, they felt the same way. They felt like that a dumb country, redneck, patriotic American had come over and unabashedly showed them that I was proud of them. And I think that was the moment that stood out at that show. And again, one of my top moments from the whole trip is to understand that me being so open and so transparent, so vulnerable, so willing to be under attack, this was the exact group that it related to the most. This was the group that they felt like what they were doing gave me that opportunity. So they had a sense of ownership in the fact that I could come over, and I didn't care if I wasn't invited back. That night, that's exactly what I said on stage. I'm not here on stage to get invited back to this stage. I'm here to give you 90 minutes to feel like you're back home. And that night was when it set in most for me. And it was also when I was rewarded the most for it. To stand on that stage and shake the hands of the men and women, literally one by one while the band played in the background. That moment will be a memory that'll last a lifetime. Our last stop on the tour was Bahrain. Bahrain had a reputation. See, in Kuwait, there was no alcohol, no pornography, no gambling. I mean, you name it, anything that could be perceived as a bad thing to them was cut out. But in Bahrain, Allah can't see. So things are a little different. And that was palpable as soon as we got there. The women dressed a little differently. They actually showed some skin. You could see some cheekbones, a couple lips, maybe a nose here or there. We're going to a culture we'd already been out of touch with America now for almost a month. And now we're going to the one place that has a little bit of American touch to it. You've got American Alley with all the foods that we would have back home. You have these bases that people are bringing their families to Bahrain. So you got a family atmosphere, you got kids there, and then you also have some of the crazy fun stuff. So you've got clubs out at night that are going and they're not drinking near beer, they're actually drinking real alcohol. I mean, you have a little bit more of the real American culture that has influenced them to some extent, but you still aren't home. And I think that was the big thing that set in once we got to the first base. The first base was a very secret base, so we weren't able to get a lot of footage from it. But the cool thing with going to this base was to see yet again that here we are in a place that even families are allowed, but we have real men and real women with real boots on the ground every day working. And they're not working at a desk, they're not standing on a stage playing music. This specific place happened to be a site that was used to intercept any type of missile that was going overhead. So to see that, and to see it in person, and to see how instrumental those people's daily routine was to our safety here back home, and more importantly, to the safety of the troops in that region, was just another humbling experience. That show at the air base there, the first one, was just another twist and turn, because when we got there, it's a pretty small compound. They were very honest with us that it wasn't maybe promoted the same as some of the other bases we went. We started with a group of about 15 to 20 people. And the cool thing was, is like when I first started playing music, to earn that respect of that small crowd, but more importantly, to watch that crowd grow and to watch that it doesn't ever get smaller. We started out with an empty tent and ended with a full tent. And to see that and to watch it, it was a cool, unique opportunity to see that what you're doing is actually paying off and that it is making a difference. They're excited because by this point, we had reached a rhythm that we knew what we were going in to do. We were coming out hot and fun, but we're gonna end the show with a really big taste of home, a really big taste of patriotism. The coolest thing about it is it showed how real the patriotism actually was. It wasn't just a fabrication that we did for cause and effect, but it was a moment that we were looking forward to being able to connect with this audience. It became the part of the show that, although it was the very end of the show, the entire day was built around we couldn't wait to fold that flag, and so that we can get the men or women or both that are serving us to take part in this amazing moment. Our final stop on the entire tour was at a well-established base in Bahrain. This one was unique and cool because it was the first one with families. I very rarely do any shows that have kids, but this was one of the unique ones to say, hey, you know, we're over here and we're playing for families that, you know, their kids aren't getting to see American either. So it's really cool to see them up and dancing to our music and living the culture that they're missing out on. You know, some of these kids are 3 and 4 years old, so they're missing out in their development years on what American music is, on what country music is. So for me to be one of the few artists that actually get to give them a taste of music, you know, that's a pretty cool experience again. That base was also cool because there's a lot more freedoms, but it also made the show a lot harder. So to go in and you don't have a captive audience like you did all the others. These people they're leaving the base every night. They're watching movies as soon as they come out. They have all the amenities that we do back home, they're just not home. But that actually ended up being the largest crowd that we played in front of. And yet again, another crowd that by the end of the show, that 90 minutes gave them that little taste. One of my proudest things became the most evident on that final night was to look back and realize that during every meet and greet, so we did these meet and greets post-show, is that there was one true common denominator, is that the one song that made everybody feel like they were back home was How Great Thou Art. You know, it's one of the songs I've plugged and I've pitched that I was able to cut it, and how much it meant to me, but you guys still haven't heard it. But they got to hear it. They got to hear my taste on it and my style. And then my willingness, and it was a hard decision, but my willingness to play it overseas in an environment that it is political still. These bases run off of certain levels of politics. So to know that it may not be well accepted, but to know how much they appreciated my willingness to show a little taste of who I was and how I grew up is really what hit home the most for them, and consistently was the song that they would come to me and be like, hey, when you did How Great Thou Art, I actually felt like I was back home.
How great thou